It's times of Israel.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Good morning. Good morning. Yeah, I see it. I'm afraid to go home. Canadian IDF soldiers fear fallout from war crimes probe. Ariella Carmel, Nati Huberman.
And two B's. Right. That threw me off for a second, but it's not broken. So my father used to work at the RCMP and knows that it's just a political thing. So he said, "His father, that's too bad." So I did work there some 50 years ago. But it's, I don't know. I'm not sure I fully trust. Trust. I don't trust. No. I think it's wondering.
It's got a picture of Nati and Carmel. Yeah.
Where's the picture? So if they were looking for anybody, there's the picture. They're trying to track them down.
Okay, let's get started. So here's the she'ela. Mi shahaya omeid besimta o betzidei rishus harabim. This is a continuation of our discussion from yesterday. There's a rabbinic accommodation that if you're standing within the proximity of something, the rabbis allowed you to attain it immediately so as to avoid conflict. So a person is standing in a simta, which is sort of like it's public, but it's off-road public. Like what we call it sidei rishus harabim. So it's on the side of a public thoroughfare, or it's in a narrow passageway that the public has access to, but it's not in the middle of a traffic area.
But no one else owns it.
No one else owns it. And within your Dalet Amos, all of a sudden you look and you see that there's money or bills or promissory notes, or other items that do not have a siman, such that you would have an obligation to return them. Uvintayim ad sheba laosfam liyada o lakiso ba adam acher vehechazik la'atzmo bechelek mehamos o ba'ota mitzia shein basimen. And in the interim, before you have a chance to pick them up and gather them together, another person comes and grabs some of it. Does that make him the legitimate owner? The fact that he grabbed them, he was faster to the draw than you? Because after all, the other guy hadn't picked it up yet. Therefore, it would seem that the second guy, who was faster, rightfully acquired these items. So the answer is no. Tshuva takonas chachamim sha'arba amos shel adam konos lo davar shel hefker hanimtza sham. The rabbis instituted a rule that you have a 4-cubit radius. It's a radius of about 6 feet all around you. That once you come into the vicinity of something that's hefker, you immediately acquire it. No one else has a right to pick up something that is now in your radius, even though you haven't yet picked up the item. And the same thing is true with any lost item that doesn't have where you wouldn't have an obligation to return it. You immediately acquire it. V'im asa kein motziano samiyado. No one else has a right to take it, therefore, and if they do, you can sue him in Beis Din and have it extracted. V'chol zeh she'oto adam haya omed b'simta o b'tzidei rishus harabim. But that's only when you're in a rishus harabim adjacent or in a small pathway where there's not a lot of human traffic. Avolim haya omed b'rishus harabim v'toch arba amos hayu dvarim she'ein bohem simanim. But if let's say you're walking through, downtown Toronto, and you look down on the sidewalk in the middle of busy business day, or what is it, Eaton Square, something like that, Eaton Center, right? What's the square called? Dundas Square.
No coasters. So
Yeah,
Nathan Phillips.
Dundas was a slave owner, so they changed the name of Dundas.
Oh my gosh.
Let's go with Nathan Phillips Square, nice Jewish boy.
Yeah, okay, or Nathan Phillips Square, or wherever you are, right? So he wasn't they'll figure out that he was a slave owner, or he supported Israel. I bet they'll change it, right? So you're not going to be able to acquire these items unless you actually lift them up. And so therefore, this rabbinic accommodation only works in a low traffic area where it's pretty quiet. But if it's a public thoroughfare, there's a lot of traffic, and something we would call a rishus harabim, where there's thousands of people who pass by this area. So then your arba amos does not acquire it. Whoever grabs it first gets it. You don't have to dive on it, but you have to actually pick it up. And therefore, in that situation, the second guy would be the rightful owner. Now, what would be the halacha if two people happen upon in a low traffic area, which is what we're talking about, and they both come into the vicinity of the item at the same time? So it's like Bava Metzia, Shnai Mochzin Batalis. If they pick it up at the same time, they both acquire it. And if it comes into their vicinity at the same time, or let's say something falls into their vicinity at the same time, okay, so they both acquire it, they become partners.
We have the ownership once you get to 6 feet radius, you have the right to get it.
It's yours. The rabbis gave it to you. Because even if you don't pick it up.
If someone swoops afterwards, it's yours.
But only if you're in a tzidei rishus harabim, if you're in a public area that is not publicly utilized.
And if you don't know it's there, just walking, and you don't notice, and somebody's picking it up.
If you don't notice, I don't think you acquire it. It's an interesting question if you're not aware of it.
You
Let me
mentally
just see.
acquiring it, like you're saying, I want that.
But this is saw it. Okay.
Yeah. I'm just wondering how far you have to go. You have to have.
Oh, so he says like this: "La'arba amos konos lo la'adam afilu kishelo amar sheyizkulo." Even if you don't say that you want it to acquire for you. So if someone tells you after the fact, hey, this is, there's something in your vicinity, and in the meantime, a guy picked it up, it sounds like you do acquire it, even if. Mhm.
Yeah, because it's common. How many times you're walking by and a guy is next to you and pick a coin or bill next to you and not.
Yeah.
If you got
Mhm.
it first.
That's right. If you got there first, it's yours.
It's almost the same as Makom Kavua. Is that the same concept?
Well, a makam kavua is a different halacha, but there is this concept of Dalet Amos with makam kavua. They do share that commonality. In general, the rabbis say that anything that is within your radius of 4 amos is as if it's your place. So this has many applications. There's applications in Maseches Eruvin, where I go outside the tchum, right, on Shabbos. So normally I'm not allowed to walk. Let's say I find myself outside the tchum, outside of my 2,000 amma boundary that is allotted to me on Shabbos. So I'm not allowed to move, but I'm allowed to go. I can go in a 6-foot radius, because that could make a difference between life and death sometimes, depending on the circumstance, right?
Is that also why maybe when we say it in the shul where
That's
that's my seat, but really.
That's what Paul was
Yeah.
asking. Yeah, makom kavua. Anything that's within 6 feet of your regular seat is considered your seat. Yeah,
Someone sitting in your exact seat, sit next to you, or behind your normal, it's still the same.
that's right.
Also up on board, you need repetition to make it. It happens once.
And then you also have to abide by the rules of the synagogue. Let's say the synagogue says there's no such thing as makom kavua, then you can't. Yeah, yeah. There's a lot to be said about that. Okay. All right. Let us continue. Geder ha'isr lo tuchal lihitaleim. Next shaila. What is the quantification of this biblical commandment? You may not hide. You may not shirk your duty of returning lost items. She'ela mishara shenaflu ma'ot mechavero ostam Yisrael. So a person sees that money has fallen out of the pocket of another Jew. Va'oto adam lo yada shenaflu hamos o ha'arnak mikiso. And the person is completely unaware that money fell out of his pocket. V'nadlam almanas legozlam. And so the person who sees this happening picks up the money and says, finders keepers. He decides he's going to keep it for himself. V'adayin lo nisyashu haba'olam me'avedasa. But the owner isn't even aware that the money has fallen, so he hasn't had yeush. Vehechazirim leba'olim acher shenisyashu. Vehechazirim leba'olim la'acher shenisyashu. Sorry, I misread that. And then you have remorse. So you initially planned to pick it up and keep it. Then you had remorse because you realize the guy is now saying, oh my gosh, I lost my money. Has anyone seen it? And you realize I should do the right thing. So you go over to him, and even though he's already had yeush, you give it to him. Hayim over al iser lo sucha lehisalim velo sigzol o bazeshetikein hisig es mashi ives batechila. So the question is, have I fixed my original crime? My original crime was that I picked up the money with the intent to keep it. But now that I realize that this fellow is so perturbed and figures he's never going to get the money back, I give it to him. Have I rectified my biblical violations? Do I need to do tshuva for my malicious intent, or have I rectified everything?
It's like stealing. So you saw that you know that you don't steal. And you don't even know that it's public.
It is.
Yeah,
It is stealing. It is stealing.
Okay.
It's
So
100% stealing.
Sure. You steal on return without.
So that's the question. Have I rectified the sin by giving it back? Normally, when I steal, I still have to do tshuva for stealing, even when I return it. I still have to do tshuva for the act against God of stealing. But the question is, but at least with stealing, I've rectified the infraction by returning it.
It's a step towards tshuva.
It's a step towards tshuva, but at least I know I don't have this outstanding infraction against me. But the question is, what about here? Have I rectified the act and have not violated lo tuchal lihitaleim? So the tshuva is misha rosh and aflu moso arnak mechavero ostam Yisrael v'not lam almanas legozlam. So he says, if you see that money or a wallet fell from your friend, and then you pick them up with the intent to steal it, kolzman shelo nisyashu haba'olim. So if it's before the owner even discovered that it's lost, or that they discovered it's lost, but they hope to retrieve it because they're looking all over for it. Yesh omrim shabitel mitzvahs aseh shal hashavas aveda va'avar alav lo sisalem va'alo sigzol. Some say that you violated three mitzvahs. You violated the positive commandment of hashavas aveda. You violated the 2 negative commandments of you may not hide or shirk, and you may not steal. And therefore, if the owner, by the time you decide to return it, has already had Yeyush, it's almost as if you're giving it back as a gift. And therefore, the infraction remains upon you. And I guess, but there's always tshuva. But he says, so that's one opinion. V'yesh omrim she'ena over ela al iser shelo tuchali hitalem shez lav ze lo yitukan shuv bechazaros lachar shemitz ya'ish. Some say no. Out of those three infractions, you only violate, you may not hide. Aval alav shelo tigzol metukan b'hashav kechol gezel. But by returning the item, just like with gezela, you rectify the sin by returning the item, so too here. And also you rectify the positive commandment that you violated of Hashavas Aveda, because you end up giving it back to him. V'lo nechshav kimatana, and it's not therefore considered a gift, but you're actually doing something substantive of giving something back to its owner. V'chein das marna shulchan aruch shepasek shitazu. And that's how the Shulchan Aruch comes out. Fine. That's very straightforward. We're not going to go into any of the notes on this matter.
But it becomes like a mitzvah because you're returning also those side. It's like a both stealing for one side because you know the owner, but on the other side he lost it. So it's not that you're breaking in and taking away from him. He lost it. You maybe the initial intention was to keep it, and then you do the tshuva and you're returning. So that, but also you're returning. It becomes like a mitzvah because
So you're fulfilling a mitzvah, but there's a mitzvah lo say that you still violated that cannot be rectified. Lo tuchali hit aleim, I was mit aleim, and there the Torah doesn't give me a remedy. The Torah doesn't offer a remedy. You have to do tshuva. You have to ask his mechila, and then you have to do tshuva to Hashem also by saying vidui. Yeah. Okay, right. But other than that, if let's say the guy isn't moichel, let's say you go over to a guy and say, "Here, I'm returning your lost item, but I want you to know that I really intended to keep it, but then I had a change of heart. Are you moichel me?" And the guy says, "No, I'm not moichel you." Like what a chutzpah! You saw explicitly that my wallet fell out of my pocket, and you were gonna keep it. What kind of person are you? I mean, here you are with the big yarmulke and tzitzis, and like what did you learn in yeshiva if that was your intention? So the truth is, then you got to really work on this. It's not, in other words, that's the ramification. Do I need to get this guy's mechila? And the answer is still, you still need to get his mechila.
Well, you saw that, you don't want to get into that, so you have to turn around and just keep walking.
Then you're certainly in violation of lo tuchali hitalei. Lo tuchali hitalei means you're not allowed to hide.
No, but you're not stealing.
So you haven't violated lo tigzol, but there's three infractions, three averas. There's the avera, there's the positive mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda, which you surely have violated if you just keep on walking. Lo tuchali hitalim, you may not hide from this mitzvah. You've certainly violated that. Lo tigzol, you haven't violated because you're not doing anything. So you violated 2 out of 3 for sure. Okay. All right. Aveda shenevda me rasha. The next shaila is a lost item that was lost from an evil person, a wicked person. Mishamotza avedas Yisrael sheyadu shehu rasha. So I find a lost item of someone who is a known rasha. What do we mean by a known rasha? Kagon, I hope it doesn't get out of whack. Kagon ba'ochel nevelos l'teyavam kisheno motzei basar kasher. Let's say a guy who knows the law, but if he can't find kosher food, he'll eat non-kosher food. O kishochel nevelos lahachis. Or he flagrantly violates the law and eats non-kosher food just to show that he can. O kishehu mechal Shabbos b'ferhesia. Or he's an open, flagrant Sabbath violator. Ha'im chayiv lahachzir sa'aveda olo. Do I have an obligation to return his lost items or not? So the tshuva is hamotze aveda v'hishal Yisrael afilu haya baal ha'aveda rasha va'ochel nevela l'teyavam chayev lahachzir lo ha'aveda. So he says it depends on the type of Russia that he is. If he violates the law because he's a mumer l'tei avam, which means that he just has a weak constitution. What do we mean by that? He succumbs easily to his desires. If that's the kind of guy that we're dealing with, so then you still have to return his lost items. He's not deliberately violating the law, but rather he's weak. And so therefore, when he passes by his favorite treif restaurant, he goes in because he can't resist. Aval ba'oichel nevelos lahachis, kegon sheyesh lefanav basar treif u'basar kosher v'oichel basar nevela. But if he does it with deliberateness, in order to show that he will not be bound by the Torah, right? So therefore, like for example, he's got two pieces of food in front of him. One is kosher and one is non-kosher. And he dafka chooses the non-kosher because he wants to show that he's not going to be bound by this archaic law. Vafilu bishar averos, humumr lahachis, or any other similar kind of avera where he does it flagrantly, then that's called a mumr lahachis. V'chein ba'api korsim va'ovdei avodah zara mechalolei Shabbos b'farhesia. And a person who is a denier of God, or he's an idolater, or he violates Shabbos publicly, asur lahachzir lahem es avedasam v'dinam kegoy she'en machzirim lo avedasa. So then these people are truly evil people, and you don't return their lost items, just like any other heathen that you don't return their lost item.
But do they know when we look at that, those people are Mishpat?
Mishpat, of course. So he puts in the parentheses, thank God. Yesh poskim she'omrim shebizman hazeh rov ha'yehudim av shehem mechalel Shabbos v'ovrim al shari surim nechshavim ketinok shenishpa. He says there are many poskim who say that nowadays, no matter what a Jew does, he's like a lost babe in the woods. V'nidonim ka'anusim ach ma shelo yadu v'lo kiblu chinuch al pi haTorah. And therefore, since they were never brought up properly, they don't know any better, you should return their lost item. Okay, and so thank God he's finally quoted the Chazon Ish, and he quotes the Chazon Ish, which we've seen already many times before. Okay, that concludes this packet. We're running through this quite quickly. I sent all the other packets, right? So we're ready to start the next packet, which is Ahole Yaakov, number 9.
By the way, Robert, just on the point there. So is there such a thing as Russia Day? Like, would Bernie Madoff be called a Russia?
I think so. I think he would. Because the evil that he perpetrated was not in the nature, it's not just a religious duty. In other words, even a non-religious person would know what's right and wrong. And a person who has such a corrupt moral compass that he allowed himself to do this is someone who we would say is a Rasha, because he lost all sense of propriety, all sense of right and wrong. Okay, next, lahashiv aveda lifnim mishuras sadin. When do you go above the law? So the she'ela is mishamatza aveda b'makom sherubam goyim lahalach enu chayiv lahachzir v'yesh lachkor. So if you live in a place which is majority non-Jewish, and so you don't have the strict obligation to return lost items, but there's still a question. Ma'adin kishabo Yisrael v'nasan ba'simonim. What happens if a Jew comes along and says, if you find something, if you found this item, you should know that it's mine. So do I have an obligation, if I found that item, to return it to him, when the halacha states that if you find something where the majority of the passersby are non-Jewish, you don't have an obligation of Hashavas Aveda. Well, it's there, you don't have an obligation, but if you can make a Kiddush Hashem, you're obligated to. And especially if there's a Chilul Hashem, if the guy suspects that you did find it. Right, exactly. So tshuva hagam shahalacha ravachat biyadenu imatza b'makom sherubam goyim enu chayv lahachzir es aveda liba'aleh asher kasher isyash mimena. That even though this is a well-known halacha, that you have no obligation to return lost items in an area where the majority of the passers-by are non-Jewish, Kagon sheyadu lemotzi mimi hachefetz avad, and let's say you know who it fell from. Min haroi lasos lifnim mishuras adin ulachzur laYehudi kishin osein ba simanim. But you should still give it back if a Jew provides simanim. Kimo shekasuv v'asisa hayosher v'hatov, as it says, you shall do that which is upright and good. Avol eino tzarich lahachriz af lifnim mishuras adin. The only thing is that you're not obligated to do is to make a public announcement if you have no reason to assume that it belonged to a Jew. V'im hamotzehu ani, v'hama'abedhu asher, eno tzarich lahachzir lifnim mishuras adin. If the person who found it is poor, and the person who lost it is wealthy, then even to go above the letter of the law, you're not obligated to do, which sounds a little bit bizarre. But I'm sure you can find sources for that. But we would never recommend keeping something that you know belonged to somebody else. Okay, even if you know the person was miyash, as we've seen many, many times before. Now, hashava saveda kishamoneya hezek. So the next shaila, misharoa mayim zormim haboim lishtof b'chazakas de chavera. You see that there's a flash flood that's coming to wash away your friend's field, or a space chaver, or your friend's home. Kagon sheyesh pitzutz b'tzinor b'chatzor. Let's say there's a burst pipe in someone's courtyard, and it threatens to cause a tremendous amount of damage to their home or their field. Or you notice your friend left his trunk open or his car door open. Or let's say you notice that the lights are on in your friend's car, and you have the opportunity to turn off the lights to prevent the battery from dying. And all other situations where your friend is not around to avert the damage. Okay? Yesh ladum. So here's the question. Ha'im yesh chiyuv al haroa lasos pu'ulos hanidrashos k'dei limnoa nezek mechavero o mishcheno? Do I have a halachic obligation to do whatever I can to prevent my friend from incurring financial loss? And this would be considered like returning a lost item, meaning that preventing someone from being damaged, is like hashava saveda. Or what we say, kol shetzarch lahotzi mikasbo kigon lahavi baal mikzoa kedei latakin hanezek eno chayv b'davar. Or let's say I'm not obligated, or maybe you could argue that I'm not obligated to spend money in order to prevent damage to my friend. Let's say I would have to call a plumber with the burst. I got to pay the plumber in order to fix the item. So maybe I don't have an obligation to spend money on that. What's the halacha? So the tshuva is kol mi sheroa mayim zormim habarim lishtof b'chazak estei chavero o es beso o tzinor beis bias heat potzates. If you encounter a burst pipe in your friend's field or in his home, or they forgot to lock their house or their car, or you see an animal that's wandering in their vineyard or their field, and the animal, because they're wandering, are starting to eat the produce of your friend's farm, you have an obligation to save your friend from damage. You have to chase away the animal. Or let's say you see that a friend of yours has a container that is filled with a valuable commodity, such as oil or honey, and it developed a crack and it's leaking. And you can save the contents. You have an obligation to save your friend from financial loss. You have to do whatever you need to do in order to prevent this damage. even if it involves a burden or it involves spending money. In Borush Chaver Yishalem Lo, as long as it's reasonable to assume that your friend will pay you back. You save the invoice, you present your friend with the invoice. And therefore, that's what you're obligated to do. You have to, if you see your friend, like, it happens. People go to Florida for the winter, and you notice that there's a huge water leak coming out of your friend's basement because it's leaking out of the house. So what do you do in a situation like that? So you have an obligation to try and do whatever you can to prevent the damage from taking place. Now, I don't know how, like, what if let's say I hire someone, a plumber, to break into the house to prevent the leak. Can I be sued because I didn't?
It's actually interesting. Two ways. So it could be unjust enrichment, which the elements are someone's benefited, you've created a corresponding detriment, which you paid money for. In last element is there a legal reason, a juristic reason for him not having to pay you? So one would be, I didn't ask you, you kicked in the door.
Yeah, or you hired the most expensive plumber. I could have fixed it myself.
Yeah, something like that. So it would be probably the least expensive amount would be probably what you have to pay. But if it's an incontrovertible benefit, but if it's a question whether it's my benefit or not, leave it alone. I would have, it wouldn't have been so bad. Maybe you wouldn't have to pay. The other one is this Good Samaritan law thing where health professionals, or if you or I go in a restaurant, someone's having a heart attack and you actually urgently help them.
Yeah.
But then it costs you money. You have to pay for the meal, you have to, ambulance, whatever it is. The statute actually says that whatever disbursements you incur in helping this person along, the other person has to pay. The statute says that.
We'll talk a little bit more about this tomorrow. We're already over time.